Welcome in to another episode of the Odds and Audibles podcast. It is that time of the week. We're bringing on our friend from Peegs.com, Jared Kelly, here for our Behind Enemy Lines segment of the week here, where we talk to the opposing team's beat writer. Jared, thank you so much for jumping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Erik. It's definitely different going on these West Coast teams podcasts now that you guys are fully ingrained with the Big Ten. I've been around Indiana for a while now. I've seen the lowest of lows that you can imagine. So now that we're getting these big time games, it's definitely don't take it for granted. So glad to be here. Glad to be heading into a big game week.
You kind of segued right where I wanted to start, which is just the elevation or the kind of revitalization. I don't even know if they really are revitalized as much as they're like vitalized for the first time, which I'm not even sure is a word.
I think they're just alive at this point.
Yeah, right. They're just finally alive and cooking. And I'm just really impressed kind of looking at the success Signetti's had there now in year two. Walk me through kind of what stood out to you in terms of just like elevating the program last year to be a playoff contender, to this year keeping them there while losing a lot of key personnel, especially on offense.
It's quite the turnaround. I mean, you've heard the national rhetoric. One of the greatest college football turnarounds in history. And I think, that's not for us to decide whether or not that's right or wrong. But in the time I've been covering Indiana, I never thought that this type of success is possible at a program like this, where you think of Indiana, you think of basketball school. I remember even 3 years ago, September would roll around and folks here would be looking more forward to basketball than they would be with the football season starting. So quite the turnaround. And, Kurt Signetti certainly has not made a ton of friends, a lot of enemies based on his, bashfulness and his confidence. But, Indiana fan base like this, that has been dormant, that's been dead, honestly, for a century now. They needed somebody like this to come in that was going to, really just breathe new life into this program. And, when Indiana first hired Signetti back in the 2024 offseason, not many people knew about him because, he started his career at the D2 level, his head coaching career, made his way, kind of slowly climbed the ranks of the coaching profession. Very different than what Dan Lanning has kind of catapulted himself into. So not many people knew about Signetti, and a lot of Indiana fans are willing to give him a chance based on his past, winning success. But a lot of guys have come through the Indiana program and a lot have failed. So for him to be able to establish success right away, it has been nothing short of remarkable. And I think the one thing that really stands out about him is his coaching staff has been with him. Some of his coordinators have been with him for 9-10 years now. A lot of his position coaches have been with him for several different schools that he's been at. So, the loyalty his coaching staff has to him, I think that's the one thing that really stands out, and that's allowed Indiana to flourish so early on.
I wanted to ask you about, you kind of touched on at the beginning there, kind of that confidence, that brash nature. Like I think somebody called it kind of like that uber ego that you need from your head coach. What stands out about that, and kind of maybe the confidence that lends itself to a football program that, again, like we've established, is like been more of a bottom feeder than a contender, and then suddenly here we are.
Yeah, with Signetti, he said it time and again that when he first got to Indiana, he could feel the doom and gloom around the program. Nobody was interested, and he needed to wake them up in a sense. So that's when you got the "I win, Google me" quote. That's when you got the Ohio State, Michigan, Purdue, they suck quotes. And he's kind of he's kind of toned it back a little bit now that he's established himself. But part of me thinks that Signetti understands that this is a business, and when it's time to be a showman, he's a showman. But especially now when they're in the season and the games are coming on fast and furious, he's really kind of toned it back a little bit. But from somebody that's in the program, that's been around the program, it's a nice change of pace, because I don't know how much Oregon fans had followed Indiana prior to Signetti, but the Tom Allen era, he's the defensive coordinator now at Clemson. He was every single press conference was just word vomit, and nothing that he said would kind of translate to the field. So every time Signetti talks now, it's you believe him, you have confidence in what he's saying, and it's like I've said, it's really just a breath of fresh air.
Let's turn now to just kind of the impressive nature of because both Oregon and Indiana are kind of similar spots. College football playoff teams a year ago lost a ton in at least key positions. I think about quarterback for you guys and a couple of those other positions. What was kind of the offseason like, and how did they solidify themselves as a program that would remain a contender for a college football playoff, for a Big Ten championship, a top 10 team?
the biggest thing was retention, right? I mean, you returned 3 All-Americans on defense with Mikal Kamara, defensive end, linebacker Aiden Fisher, D'Angelo Pons at cornerback. So that right there gives you a lot of hope going into this season that Indiana's defense, it was an elite defense last season, that it would translate into has this season. And then offensively, they had to replace a lot. Obviously, Curtis Rourke last year was tremendous for Indiana. He goes to the NFL. Indiana wins the prize transfer recruiting battle for Fernando Mendoza. He had offers from Georgia, Miami, a bunch of Power 4 schools wanted him. So obviously Mendoza has been huge to pick up at quarterback and step right in, and he's honestly been better, I think, than Curtis Rourke has. And then you just fill in all the different skill positions. Whereas last year I felt that Signetti kind of had to do a patchwork job. He had to just find guys that would fit his system and that could play right away. This season, it's been more of, hey, we have these guys coming back, these known commodities. Now we can kind of start filling the holes, the depth, shoring up the depth at a lot of spots. So that's where I think Indiana has improved the most this season. Is you have those established stars that you can count on, like the 3 guys on defense we talked about, like Elijah Surratt, the All-American receiver, some of the linemen that have been really good this year, and then you fill the rest of the roster out with proven talent from P4 levels. And that's honestly one place where Indiana benefited the most this offseason from last year's success was they could go in the transfer portal to Power 4 recruits and no longer had to take, the best of the best from the mid-majors because they had, the track record to show transfer guys. So the retention part is obviously huge, but Indiana's talent evaluation in the portal has been equally as big.
I wanted to kind of pick your brain on Mendoza a little bit because it stood out. You're not the first person that's talked about maybe he's almost a better fit than Rourke was, which I think surprises people considering that was another guy who was until late, in that picture for the Heisman Trophy, incredibly productive season that he had. So a couple of people have mentioned it's the fact that Rourke was dealing with kind of a knee injury, didn't run very much, and Mendoza's got a little bit more maybe in those legs that opens things up, especially in an RPO offense. Because this is a very heavy RPO centric offense, which I would like. Can I get your thoughts on? What else is it? Is it as simple as he just can run it a little bit more? Because I feel like maybe that can't be the entire picture here because he's been such a accurate and consistent passer.
Yeah, it's certainly nuanced, and the running is a part of it, but Mendoza is by no means a dual threat. He's definitely not Dante Moore on the ground.
Yeah.
But I mean, we didn't even find out about this until the end of last season that Curtis Rourke played the entire season on a torn ACL. And had we had known that, obviously our outlook, on him, on his season would have changed, a little bit. But, for all intents and purposes, Curtis Rourke was basically a statue passer last year. He couldn't really move outside the pocket. In Mendoza, he's not going to be a guy that's breaking off, 40, 50 chunk yards on the ground, but he is a guy that's going to be able to get out of the pocket. He's really, really adept at throwing on the run, just really, really good accuracy. And, him coming over from California last year where, Cal was a middling program. I think they made their first bowl game last year with Mendoza in quite some time. Cal had like the worst Power 4 offensive line in the nation. He had like something like 50 sacks on the year. He was running for his life. Mendoza was all of last season. So now that he's coming over to an Indiana offense where, the blocking is much better up front, there's better skill players. The talent was always there with Mendoza at Cal, but I think putting the right pieces around him was kind of the next step in his evolution. And Kurt Signetti, the past 5 years, I believe it is now, he's had a new transfer quarterback in the past 5 years every year. And he's done wonders with all 5 of them. So Mendoza was just a logical next step in that. And this is a guy people forget too. He basically had no Power 4 offers coming out of high school. He was committed to Yale originally before Cal stepped in late. And, the talent level and you see the physical traits, the 6'5", 225, prototypical NFL guy. I don't think anybody really saw him projecting to be this good talent-wise, but he can make all the throws at all 3 levels. He really is a perfect fit for Indiana. And I thought Curtis Rourke was a perfect fit last year, but Mendoza especially, he might be even better than what Indiana had last year.
I mentioned it a moment ago, just the RPO run pass option nature of this offense and this has been, I think, a staple for Signetti for some time with Shanahan. Walk me through kind of like is it almost because Lanning was kind of alluding to the fact that like they run essentially the same play or a couple of the different plays like on very much like high frequency of downs. Should Oregon fans expect to see like an RPO option in almost every play? Like, is that too much? Is that too far of a reach, or kind of like what can you say about this offense and just kind of how it operates? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, this is Kurt Signetti's offense first and foremost. He's had a couple different coordinators. Mike Shanahan, the coordinator with him now, has been with him for I think 4 or 5 years now, calling plays. But this is Signetti's offense. This is his baby. He grew up as a quarterback whisperer, if you will. So this is very much his fingerprints are all over it. And the RPO is a huge part of it. I wouldn't say you're going to see it on every single play, but there are things that I would say 75%, 80% of plays you give Fernando Mendoza a chance to sort of make his own decisions and make his own reads. And this is something that Indiana, even going back to last year, really excelled at, getting their quarterbacks to understand, here are the different coverages. Here's what we're looking for at the line of scrimmage, whether to pass it, whether to hand it off. So it is definitely a big part of it, but it's not the only part of Indiana's offense. And this ties back to your previous question with Mendoza that we were just discussing. He came from a Cal system that ran a lot of RPO too. So him coming over to Indiana, the transition was a little bit more seamless in that way, which I think has allowed Mendoza to really thrive. But Indiana's offense in general, they like to play really balanced. Kurt Signetti, and this is kind of made Indiana fans frustrated in the past. He's really steadfast in playing a balanced scheme. He doesn't want to favor the run of the pass one way or the other too much. And there have been situations like the Iowa game 2 weeks ago where it felt like Indiana could have taken more shots downfield, but it felt like Signetti was really, I wouldn't say stubborn, but he really wanted to establish the run, even though Indiana's offensive line was not doing a great job. So it's going to be a really balanced attack. Indiana's going to work in a lot of RPOs, but I've said this before. I think this is the type of game, it's a kitchen sink type game where you throw everything at the wall, trick plays, whatever you got in the bag. I think this is the game where if Indiana wants to try some crazy stuff, this is the game to do so.
Well, I wanted to touch on the run game because we spent the majority talking of the offense about Mendoza and kind of the scheme, but this is, I believe, the Big Ten's #1 rush offense right now. This is one of the stronger rush offenses in the country, and very similar to Oregon. And you probably picked up on this just kind of looking at the figures. They incorporate more guys than you probably expect, like 4 guys with 25 or more carries already on the season. Roman Hemby is a player Oregon fans remember last year from Maryland. But just kind of looking at the numbers and the PFF grades, it looks like Kobe Martin, one of the younger backs, has really popped. Kind of run through the run game and what's impressed you so far to this point.
Yeah, first 4 games of the season, Indiana ran for 300-plus yards in each of the first 4 games, which, obviously that was going to come down once Big Ten play really, really ramped up. But even against Illinois, they ran for 300 yards, which is really impressive because, Illinois, as it turns out, isn't all that bad after all, after the
Right.
53-point loss to Indiana. So, last week was a little bit of a struggle for Indiana running the ball against Iowa, which Iowa is a terrific run defensive team. They play very physical. So what you're looking at, Indiana has really whittled it down to 2 guys with Roman Hemby, the lead back, and then Kalon Black comes in for kind of short yardage to spell Hemby. And you mentioned Kobe Martin. He's a redshirt freshman. A lot of his stats this year have come at the end of lopsided games.
Okay.
And he didn't play at all at Iowa, so I wouldn't expect him to be a major factor there. It should be noted too that Indiana lost Lee Beebe. He was the Indiana's leading yards per carry guy through 4 games. He suffered a torn ACL, so he's done for the season. So Indiana's really looking at 2 running backs now with Hemby and Black, and those 2 guys are kind of different stylistically. Whereas Hemby's more of a big play threat. He can break off that really big run, that game-changing run. And Kalon Black is going to be, I call him a bowling ball. I believe he was on Bruce Feldman's freak list this year. Super strong guy, super sturdy, really tough to tackle between the tackles, more of a north-south guy. But Indiana's run game, they're going to rely on it a lot. They like to establish the line of scrimmage early and often. So, Hemby and Kalon Black are the 2 guys you're really looking at there.
I was going to ask you, so we're going to take a quick break on the position by position, kind of running through it. I was going to ask you about that Illinois game, and I kind of dropped the ball and forgot. What exactly happened there? I'm still because like you said, I've watched Illinois a couple of other games this year, and they don't look like a bad team. Like, this looks like a team that deserves to be ranked, and yet you look at that result, 63-10, and you go, well, that sort of makes you question what the Illini are. What happened there, and how much of what the Hoosiers were able to do translates to a game like this, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, a game like that is very much an anomaly. I don't think Illinois is going to get blown out by that much again this year, and I don't think Indiana is going to blow out a Big Ten team by that much again this year. And it was kind of a perfect storm for the Hoosiers. Illinois had, I think it was like 4 of their 5 starting defensive backs were out of that game, so they were banged up in the secondary. And then up front, Illinois couldn't block a traffic cone that game. I don't know what happened to their offensive line that game, but Indiana was getting to Luke Altmaier within a split second pretty much every single snap. And you can kind of feel the winds changing there around the midway through the second quarter, early third quarter, that this was not going to be a competitive game. So I believe Ryan Day even said it yesterday. Like, he watched tape of Illinois and of that Illinois-Indiana game. He said basically you got to throw it away. Illinois is not going to play as bad as it did in that game. Indiana's probably not going to play as well or blow out teams of that margin again this season. So it's a bit of an anomaly, but it shows what Indiana can be capable of if they're really clicking.
All right, let's flip over to wide receiver. Elijah Surratt and Amar Cooper, two of the most. I mean, I was looking at 12 touchdowns combined for those two guys. That jumps off the page, especially when you're going into the midway point of the season. I think Surratt's a guy we know about, as you mentioned earlier. Super productive player a year ago. Super productive at James Madison. Give us the rundown on what makes these two guys so productive and maybe why they're a good fit with Mendoza.
Yeah, they're two different kind of skilled, two differently skilled guys, whereas Surratt is more of your boundary possession receiver, your 50-50 guy where you're going to throw it up, fade balls, and let him go up and get it. A really good route runner, too. He doesn't drop many passes, just a super veteran player who knows how to, find soft spots in the defense. And then Cooper is going to be your big play guy out of the slot. I'm not too familiar with Oregon secondary, but whoever their nickel corner is going to have to be really good on Cooper because he's got Indiana's going to use all around the field. Bubble screens, reverse handoffs, go balls. They're going to try to get Cooper involved and use his speed any way they can. He's probably Indiana's most explosive player on offense. So those two kind of mesh really well because of the different things they do well. And then, the third receiver, EJ Williams, he was a former top 100 recruit, started his career at Clemson, finishing his career now at Indiana. He's 6'4", 210 pounds. He can really fly down the field. If teams in the past have really focused in on Surratt and Cooper, and then you leave EJ Williams on an island, that gives Indiana, a lot of different options to go to in the passing game. So much like Oregon this year, where they've had an array of guys they can throw to, Indiana is similarly, at least their top three guys. You feel really confident if Mendoza looks to any of them to pass.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back, and I want to tackle some of the trench play, get to some keys of the game, and we'll wrap this one up with Jared. All right, welcome back to the Outs and Audibles podcast. I teased it there. I wanted to talk about the Indiana offensive line, especially in pass protection, coming off a game with Iowa where it looked like it was kind of tough sledding at times. I've seen some of the clips there, especially for the right tackle, just having a hard time with speed rush, with some of the staying with some of the pass rush moves. Did that feel like a bit of an aberration? Is that been a big talking point in the bye week amongst the Hoosier fans and people in the media out there? I'm curious on kind of what the concern level is about that part, because that seems to be an area where maybe Oregon could exploit.
Yeah, I think it's super concerning. It's probably the biggest discussion point coming out of that Iowa game. And Phil Parker, Iowa's defensive coordinator, is tremendous. If there was a Hall of Fame for coordinators, he'd be in there just based on his track record at Iowa. But part of me thinks it was a little bit of an aberration. Part of me thinks that, there is cause for concern. Now, Iowa, I think they sent pressure on like 72% of snaps for Indiana. Like, that's not going to happen again, most likely. Iowa was basically hell-bent on sending the house and making Indiana beat you, in one-on-one matchups on the outside. Indiana did not handle the blitzing pressure very well. The running backs got blown up a couple times on blitz pickups. And you mentioned, the right side of Indiana's offensive line this season has been underwhelming, I think. It's fair to say. The left side of their offensive line has been really good. They have continuity there going back to last season, but the right side of the line, and you mentioned the right tackle Khalil Benson for Indiana, he struggled a lot in pass block this year. If Indiana was struggling against Iowa, this Oregon game with the heightened talent level and athleticism, it kind of does scare you if you're an Indiana fan, how they're going to be able to handle that front seven. Now, Dan Lanning obviously is a defensive mastermind. They probably aren't going to blitz as much as Iowa did, because Iowa just sent the house on like every play. But Indiana really, this is probably the one area where if Indiana is going to have a chance to stay competitive in this game and give it a chance at the end, you can't have the blocking busts that you did against Iowa.
It kind of stood out to me as well that Signetti was asked about kind of trench play and did mention Oregon has the size and strength advantage, perhaps. Was that specifically just Oregon's interior defensive line, or is that a concern on the other side of the ball with the way Indiana's built on their defensive line?
I think that more so has to do with Oregon and just the caliber of players they have on the defensive line. They haven't, quite honestly, they won't see anything else like this year. You could argue Penn State is equally as good, but just from what I've watched, I think Oregon is better on the defensive line this year. And Indiana, they've done a good job, granted, under Signetti in the past 2 years of shoring up that offensive line, because for a lot of years, I mean, I watched Indiana for decade plus now, and they have been horrendous blocking. So Signetti has really helped turn that around in that regard. And this offseason, they really made an emphasis to go out and get P4, proven talent, proven offensive linemen. In regards to size and physicality, I think Indiana can match that with Oregon. My concern comes with the explosiveness, the get off the snap, things like that, where Indiana might not have the same caliber of athletes. And you alluded to it, the speed rush, things like that. Like, I don't know if Indiana is going to be able to match that. So a lot of it's going to come down to, can Indiana handle that pressure first and foremost, and then the running backs too. They're going to have to do it. They're going to have to do a really good job in pass pro to keep Fernando Mendoza on his feet.
Well, people know about Kamara up front. You mentioned Fisher and Pons. Who are some other names to know with this defense? Because I know that defensive line for Indiana, it seems like they've found some pieces that maybe last year were either kind of depth pieces that are becoming standouts, or I know they hit the portal with some success as well.
Yeah, defensively, I mean, Aiden Fisher's the quarterback of the defense. He's been in this system going back to the James Madison days. He's the one that leads everyone on the field. He's the green dot guy that sends all the play calls in. So he's really the focal point of the defense. And then, around him, it's a really nice supporting cast. Kamara this year, his numbers haven't been great. His underlying numbers have been good in terms of pressures and win rate. But the sacks and the TFLs aren't quite what they were last year. And I think a lot of that is because teams are double teaming him. They're sending, chip blocks his way. But it's allowed the rest of Indiana's defensive line to excel because Kamara is getting that extra attention. So a lot more guys are getting one-on-one battles that they're winning. In the interior, Indiana has been really, really good this year at defensive tackle. Two guys there, Tyreek Tucker, Hosea Wheeler, and then you could throw Mario Landino in the mix too. Those three guys have been really good. In Indiana, their defensive scheme under Brian Haynes, he was a Broyles Award finalist last year. They really emphasized their interior getting north-south. They want their D tackles getting into the backfield and forcing pressures. Whereas a lot of teams, their D tackles might just be hold up guys to let blitzers get through. Indiana wants their D tackles to win up front and get into the backfield. So it's definitely different there. And then at cornerback, it's going to be Pons, who's back from injury. You're going to get Jamari Sharp. He's a redshirt junior stepping into the starting lineup this year. He's performed pretty well. Amari Farrell, I've been very high on him. I think he has NFL potential at safety. And then, you got two seniors in Lewis Moore and Devon Boykin there next to him at safety. So this is a really veteran group for Indiana on defense. You have a really, really good defensive coordinator in Brian Haynes. So the more I look at this game, I don't think it's going to be the shootout that many people are predicting, because I think these two defenses are just too good to allow that many points. So I have a lot of confidence in Indiana's defense going into this game. It's more so offensively, are they going to get bogged down and whatnot?
You mentioned Pons. Sounds like he'll be back this week. He missed the Iowa game. Are there other injuries to be kind of on the radar, or is this a team coming off a bye week that seems pretty healthy?
Yeah, the bye week came at a great time for Indiana. They weren't necessarily banged up, but after 5 games, it was nice to kind of reset for them, and to get Pons back, your All-American corner, is huge. Indiana's largely they've done a good job of keeping the injury bug away this season. I mentioned Lee Beebe. He was their leading rusher through the first 3 games. He's done for the season with an ACL, but aside from him, they've done a really good job of keeping people healthy. And all the key players that Indiana needs in a game like this will be available for game day.
All right, last one here is just going to be give me an offensive key, give me a defensive key, and then give me you can give me a game prediction. We talked about this beforehand if you want, but just give me kind of how you expect this game to play out.
Yeah, I mean, offensively, there's a number of ways you can go about this. I think first and foremost, you got to protect Fernando Mendoza, and that's obviously that's an automatic caveat in any game, but especially in a game like this where Oregon is so talented up front in their front seven. Got to keep him on his feet, and I think this is a game where Fernando Mendoza, if him and Dante Moore especially, Those two guys are sort of Heisman front runners right now.
Mhm.
This is the type of game where if Indiana's going to pull off an upset or give themselves at least a chance going into the fourth quarter, you're going to need a generational type game from Mendoza here on the road in this kind of environment. And I assume I'd imagine there's going to be a ton of NFL draft scouts, executives watching this game. This is a chance for Mendoza to really prove himself as a guy that's worthy of going in the first round in the NFL draft, Heisman talks. So he cannot get flustered, and I don't think he will get flustered based on what we've seen. But how he handles and deals with pressure and adversity, that's going to be something we haven't quite seen, especially in a road environment this season to this extent. And then defensively, Oregon is so explosive, as you know, obviously. And Indiana's been pretty good this year at keeping, chunk plays to a minimum and tackling in space and not letting, guys get free on missed tackles and whatnot. But limiting Oregon's explosiveness, that's probably the one concern I have defensively is, Oregon has so much talent at tight end, running back, receiver. I don't know if Indiana necessarily has the athletes to keep up in that regard, which makes it all the more important that they're prepared. They're locked into their keys. So yeah, limiting explosive plays. You can't let Oregon start feeling good about itself early on with big plays. So those two things I think on defense. And then final score prediction. We just did our podcast over on Peaks.com previewing this game yesterday. I said Oregon wins 28-24. I know, like we mentioned, I mean, there's a lot of people that think this is going to be a shootout because it's two really, really good offenses. I think defense wins the day here for both sides, and it's going to be a tough battle down to the finish. I think Indiana is going to be well prepared going into this game, coming off the bye week, as will Oregon. But the home field advantage, I know it's supposed to rain there too on Saturday, so that could factor in. I think it's going to be low, a little bit more low scoring than fans might think. But ultimately, the home crowd advantage, just the caliber of talent, the depth for Oregon, I think that's going to play a huge factor. And ultimately, I think the Ducks pull it out.
The elements are kind of an interesting element to this game, if you will, just because I'm not sure how much it's going to rain, but it is in the forecast. And there have been certainly games where I think even when Mendoza played at Cal and they came in, it was just like a torrential downpour, and it just throws things off. I don't know if that's what we're going to get on Saturday, but well, I guess we'll let Mother Nature decide. Thank you, Jared, so much for coming on the show. I will be hopping on his podcast, I believe, on Thursday, so you can go check that out if you want to hear my thoughts about this game with Jared leading the show. But thank you so much, Jared, and we will talk to you later, folks.